Let's start with the topic evolution. Evolution is a process of gradual change from one form of the life to another through a series of the intermediate form. Evolution the one form of the life another form of the life that change that is called the evolution. In this course of this process, new forms were formed and get established along the side or in the place of the original type. So, evolution can be defined as change in the characteristic of a species. Species characteristic that change evolution, and this change of the characteristic that changes the changes in the characteristics occur over the generation. Next generation the change evolution sign. So why does the evolutions occur? Evolutions occur. Why? In order to adapt in the changing environment. Environment to the adapt evolution and the evolutions of living organism is known as the organic evolution. As already started, the first living organism emerged about 3,000 million ago. The first living organism, or we believe that living organism start existing on the earth 3,000 million years ago. And today, the earth is inhabited by more than 2 million different species. And now in the earth, there are more than 2 million different types of the species living in this earth. How these new species had evolved and how the present day plants and animals came into being. So we are going to learn about how these living organisms or different living organisms are still living on this earth, or what helps in the existence of this living organism or in this earth. The process of changing the genetic material had occurred gradually and continuously since the life started on the earth. Life 3,000 million years ago existed. Once the life started existing on the earth, the change in the genetic material also occurred continuously. DNA, the genetic material means DNA. DNA changes and this change in DNA help in the existence of the organism or survival of the organism in the earth. The inheritable variations have been the means of the life survival when external and condition changes on the earth, and these variations become the threat evidence in different species alive on the earth today. So, due to the change in the genetic material, what happens is that the living organisms are able to adapt in the changing environment. Environment the change genetic material that changes and that changes help in the existence of the organisms on the earth. So, there are three theories that explain the evolutions of living organisms. Living organisms are evolve the process the theory ahumna explain the There are three different theories to explain the course of organic evolution. The first theory is the Lamarckian theory of inheritance of the acquired character, propounded by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in the year 1809. Theory of natural selection propounded by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace in 1858. Mutations theory propounded by Hugo de Vries in the year 1901. If we breed a group of the mice, all this progeny will have tails. So, we breed a group of the mice. A group of the mice together and all these mice have the tail. Now, if all the tail of these mice are surgically removed in each generation, will these tailless mice produce a tailless progeny? Obviously, no, because change in the non-reproductive tissue cannot be passed on to the DNA of the germ cell. So, removal of the tail cannot change the gene of the germ cell of the mice. We have learned that evolutions change in the organism due to the change in the DNA. DNA the change the next organism the change live. So what happens is that when we breed a group of the mice together and when we cut all the tails of the mice, what happened? The next generations, tailless mice when they allow to fuse, and as the fusion or as the result of the fusion, the new individual develop. Mice to get tails in jet, next generation da pogla mice to get loina tail yareba. Maramdi that tail is not the reproductive tissue. Tail do get reproductive tissue nateba. They are non-reproductive tissue. As the result, what happened? As there is no change in the DNA, genetic material da DNA da changes like the banana kadaway. Masagi next generation da pogla mice sing da loina tail yaroga pogla. This means that evolution evolutions only occur when the changes occur on the DNA. DNA the changes like evolutions to eba. Kaigumba DNA the changes like the evolutions to eba. One of the most accepted theory of the organic evolutions is the theory of the natural selections proposed by Charles Darwin. Evolution explained over the theory of Lamarckian theory of the inheritance of the acquired character, theory of natural selections, and the mutations theory. Out of this theory, the most accepted theory is the theory of the natural selections, which was proposed by Charles Darwin in his book Origin of the Species. This theory. So let's see about this theory. Overpopulations of the offspring and the consequent struggle for the existence. The multiplications of the individual of a species occur in the geometrical proportion, but a large majority of the individual do not survive, and consequently the number of the individual in the species remains more or less the same. The survivor in any populations remains survive because of their better adapted to reach the limited resources, food, etc. of the environment. These limited resources are the cause of the struggle for the existence. This paragraph explains that every organism produces offspring. Organism offspring produce. Even though the living organisms produce offspring, all the offspring are not able to survive. Ngasagi organism na produce new individual do kadoi loina ba akogi environment ta survive tawgani haiba laiteba. Why? Because we have limited resources and limited food. Akogi environment ta kadoi limited resources limited food labor, and those organisms which can adapt to the limited resources or in the limited food will survive, and those organisms which cannot adapt in the limited resources or the food cannot survive, and this results in the struggle for the existence. Variations and their inheritance. The survivor in the struggle for the existence have certain favorable variations. As the result of struggle for existence, only those individuals showing variations in the right direction survive, and these variations are transmitted to the offspring. Others with unfavorable variation perish and result to the survival of the fittest. Variations means changes. Inheritance means transfer of these changes to the next generation. So within a populations changes to ever. These changes occur due to the change in the genetic material. So when the changes occur, the individual having the favorable variations will be survive, and this favorable variation changes to environment same orakanda means adaptable makanda kadui the organisms are able to survive, and these variations is again passed to their next generations. Nasai change so kadui next generations to pass away so that the next generations will be able to survive, and those organisms which are unfavorable will not be able to survive. The next is the natural selection. Nature of the environment select those individuals best fitted for the survival. The survival of this fittest is the result of the selections and the proliferations of only those organisms which are most suitably adapted to the environment and most successful in the mating. Struggle of the survival within the populations. Organisms always try to survive in the change in the environment. So what happens is that the natural environment select those organisms which will be able to fit in the changed environment, and those organisms only survive, and those organisms which are unfitted are not survive and they exit from the earth. In this way, the organism evolved and they started living or existing in the earth in this changed environment. The next topic is the formations of new species, that is the speciation. Speciation is the evolutions of new species from the pre-existing one. Speciation hagadi kaina new organism develop torba evolve torba hana leramba organism degi new organism ama evolve torba dubu kona speciation haina khangneiba. A species consists of population of organisms which are able to breed among themselves in the natural conditions. So how can we define species? Species means when a group of same kind are able to breed among themselves, they produce offspring, and this result in the formations of a set of the population of that particular species. Whenever segments of a population are isolated geographically over a period of number of generations, the two isolated segments of the population might gather enough genetic differences to result in the lack of the genetic exchange, even if the original barrier is removed. In this way, new species are being generated. This means that when two organisms of the same kind organism when they live far away from each other, what will happen? Due to the natural selections, new genetic material will be developed, and this led to the development of the new species. For better understanding, let's see an example. So let's see an example here. This is a population of the beetles, which is red in the color. So some of these beetles migrated to the different place due to some factors. In this field, a group of the red beetles is there. So some of the red beetles migrated to the other place due to some factors. So this beetle which is migrated into the different place or different area will start repopulate, and after repopulations, new set of the populations will develop in this field. So over and over time, this red beetle and this beetle cannot reproduce, since this beetle and this beetle are very far away from each other. They cannot reproduce among themselves, and we say them as a reproductions isolated, since they are very far from each other. So as the time passes, what will happen? More and more generations will come, and natural selections will start working differently on this beetle side and on this beetle. So natural selection will start working differently on these two different species, and as the result, it results in the formations of the different species or the new species. This is how the new organisms or the new group of the organisms developed from the pre-existing organism. The next topic is the fossil. When organisms die, their body will decompose and be lost. So when any organism die, either it is a plant or either it is animal, their body will be buried inside the earth and they will start decomposing. Decomposing is the kind of and they will be lost. But fossils are the material remains or the traces of the organism preserved inside the crust. Not all the part of the organism will decompose. Some of the part will remain inside the surface. That remain traces which is found inside the earth crust are called the fossil. Fossilization or formations of fossil involves the conversions of an organism or its part into a hard surface or rock. So when an organism die, they will start decomposing and some part of the organism will remain inside the earth crust. So that remained part will become a hard substance, and that formations of the hard surface from an organism is called the fossilization. While a body or some part of it get caught into the hot mud and they will not decompose quickly, and the mud will eventually harden and retain the impression of the body or the body part. So when any organism or a part of the body of any organism get caught into the hot mud, what will happen? They will become more hard and eventually this hard substance will remain inside the earth crust. How do we know how old are the fossils? It is reasonable to suppose that the fossils which we found closer to the surface are more recent than the fossils we find in the deeper layer. Let's see here. Let's see. This is the surface of the earth and this is the inside earth. So this is the condition number 1, condition number 2, and the condition number 3. In the condition number 1, we see the fossil is found very near to the surface of the earth. In the condition 2, we found that the fossil is little bit deeper compared to the condition number 1, and in the condition number 3, we found that the fossil is very inside the or deep inside the earth. If we compare the age of this fossil is the one which is formed very recently, and this fossil is the one which is formed or which is very old. In this way, from the fossils, we can study about the evolution. From the study of this fossil, we can understand about the life form of the past. So from the fossils which we found inside the earth crust, we can also find out how old is the organism, how the organisms look like, and how the new life started existing, or how the organisms are formed. So the fossil helps in the study of the evolutions of the different organisms. It enables us to trace the origin and trends of the evolution of several groups of the plant and the animal. So fossil helps in the finding of the origin of the organisms, how the organisms are formed, how the organisms look like, and this helps in the study of the evolutions of various groups of the plants and the animal. This is how the fossil look like for the different organism.